Part 13. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Mi. Chapter 121. No problem, Your Majesty the Saint. Wen Zi put on a pair of white gloves and gently put them on Qiu Wu's body. If it were normal, Qiu Wu would definitely scold the lowly insect for not touching her noble and beautiful body. But now, listening to what Ixier just blurted out, Qiu Wu felt a bad feeling all over his body. What do you want to do? Qiu Wu asked subconsciously. Asking knowingly. Facing Qiu Wu, Wen Zi lost the patience he had when explaining to Gao Qiang. He is just waiting now. The power of Sephirah is very strong, and the status of the Kabbalah tree of life is also very high. Therefore, the sacrifices required are naturally more demanding. If Qiu Wu hadn't brought a team of sacrifices to the Holy Light God system, Wen Zi might have had a headache for a long time if he wanted to reverse the source of essence in her body. Just at this time, the sacrifices seemed to be almost finished. In Qiu Wu's trembling eyes, a gentle holy light appeared in Wen Zi's hand. As the holy light covered Qiu Wu's body, the heartbreaking pain Qiu Wu expected did not come. On the contrary, this light was very gentle, making Qiu Wu feel as if she had returned to the embrace of the mother tree. Until she saw a figure composed of holy light appearing on the mother tree in her mind. The reflection of the mother tree in Qiu Wu's mind gradually shattered. She felt it. She was moving away from the mother tree, just like other rebellious children. Xueran, who was hugged by Shasha, opened her eyes wide at this moment and covered her mouth with her hand. In the eyes of outsiders, Qiu Wu's appearance suddenly became older after being touched by Wen Zi's hand with holy light. At the beginning, you can still see a bit of beauty. But as time went by, Qiu Wu's face now had nothing to do with the past. Gao Qiang has turned his head away. After all, Qiu Wu's face at this moment is really unbearable to look at. Just looking at it will make people feel an inexplicable fire rising from their hearts. If there was any impulsive person among the people present, he might have slapped Qiu Wu in the face. You successfully desecrated deleted data, and you received the blessing of the God of Beauty. Listening to the notification sound in her ears, Qiu Wu no longer cared to see what blessing she had just received. She had a premonition. What was happening to her now might frighten her more than death. What exactly did you do to me? Qiu Wu said with trembling lips. Ixier looked at Qiu Wu's face at the moment and nodded with some satisfaction. Then he pulled out a bronze mirror from the tribute stand of the statue and handed it to Qiu Wu. We made you return to the way you should be, dear. Ixier smiled with his eyes narrowed. I don't know if it's because I am too satisfied with Qiu Wu at this moment. Ixier even used the tone of talking with friends on weekdays. No. Looking at his crooked, wrinkled and terrifying face in the bronze mirror, Qiu Wu's entire vision lost its luster. How could that face grow on her body, the embodiment of beauty? Even a disfigured elf is probably tens of thousands of times more beautiful than she is now. If Qiu Wu is released at this moment. If nothing else, it's not impossible to scare a timid person to death in the middle of the night. That's it? Seeing Qiu Wu suddenly lost his mind and looked like a zombie, Ixier curled his lips. Blackening is 3 times stronger is not just talk. In the study of saints, the power brought by the reverse Kabbalah Sephirah is usually much stronger than the Kabbalah Sephirah. Just now, Isel was worried that after being reversed, the autumn ball would suddenly explode and destroy the cathedral. But now it seems. She seems to be really resistant to the power of the Sephirah of inverse Kabbalism. Originally, Ixier wanted to tease Qiu Wu's face, but looking at the ugly face at this moment, she couldn't do it. Okay, she admits that she is also a bit of a beauty control. Let's do it. Ixier turned his head and no longer looked at Qiu Wu's face. Wen Zi nodded, and then greeted the people next to him. Soon, some citizens stood up holding ritual daggers stained with unknown liquid. The dagger stabbed into Qiu Wu's chest. Poof. I don't know if the leader cut an artery, but a column of blood spurted out. But Qiuwu didn't even let out a scream. After losing her beauty, she seemed to have completely lost herself and her desire to live. Instead of living with an ordinary or ugly face, she would rather die on her own. Gradually, Qiuwu's eyes that lost their luster gradually closed. A dark heart was pulled out by Wenzi's subordinates. Because it was taken out now, the heart was still beating. I didn't expect that. I actually did it, Ixier said, covering his mouth. Seeing the look in Gao Qiang's eyes, Ixier explained a little. According to my original idea, I just wanted to try to see how far this concept transformation can go. After all, the source of Kabbalah's essence is still in the mother tree. This elf lord is not the kind of person who takes away the authority of the mother tree at birth. Logically speaking, even if it is converted into the reverse Kabbalah source material, we cannot plunder it. But, looking at the dark heart, what Ixier wanted to say was self-evident. Reverse Kabbalah essence 6 ugly. The plunder was successful. The two-sided nature of the holy light fundamentally reversed Qiuwu's essence type, which even involved the concept of time. That is, the rules of this war game are somewhat different. If it were in the regular feudal era, the ability equal to this blessing would probably be more than enough to rank as a miracle item. After easing the shock in his heart, Aicier patted his face and reorganized his expression. Then he turned his head to look at Gao Qiang. From what you just saw, the two-sided nature of the holy light can completely reverse the concept of essence. And next, we are going to reverse the concept back. At this time, Wenzi's subjects had already cleaned up Qiuwu's body. Wenzi called Gao Qiang and asked Gao Qiang to stand at the position where Qiuwu had just died. Bai Hexia made a reassuring gesture to Gao Qiang. Anyway, there was no one faster than him in this underground facility. With him watching, Gao Qiang could not be in any danger. But Sasha. Looking at Sasha's actions, Gao Qiang's mouth twitched. Sasha was not interested in the source material at all. At this moment, she was holding a can of jam that she had taken out at some point, pestering Juluo and Swaran to make her a smoothie. Seeing Gao Qiang looking at her, Sasha stuck out her tongue. Lord, go and rest assured. I will leave you a portion of the smoothie when it is ready. Why does it sound like a curse on me? Gao Qiang couldn't help but complain in his heart. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Mi Shida Di. Chapter 122. Seeing that holy light had emerged on Wenzi's hand, Gao Qiang no longer paid attention to Sasha's movements, and the whole person became serious. Don't worry, it shouldn't hurt, Wenzi explained. Then he stretched out a finger, first tapped Qiuwu's heart, and then tapped Gao Qiang. After being covered by the holy light, the black stain on Qiuwu's heart gradually faded, and it turned back into an ordinary fleshy heart. This heart was placed in a wooden box by Aicier for safekeeping. As for Gao Qiang, the first moment it was covered by the holy light, he saw the traces of the root vines again. With the perspective flashing, the overwhelming root vines seemed to pour in from every corner, completely covering the cathedral of the Lord of Holy Light. It was an illusion again. Gao Qiang understood in his heart. If it wasn't an illusion, the other people standing beside him at this moment couldn't have been motionless. Just watching the root vines getting closer and closer to him, so close that it almost covered all the vision that Gao Qiang could see. Suddenly, a cold breath dissipated. Gao Qiang felt as if a giant eye suddenly opened behind him. But when he turned his head, there was nothing. After this feeling, the roots that swept in like a tide seemed to retreat like a tide. After the roots retreated, a figure was exposed. Gao Qiang was stunned for a moment. Because he knew this figure. In fact, this should be the third time he saw him. The Lord of Holy Light. The first time was when he entered this war game. Gao Qiang originally wanted to join the Holy Light God system. Unfortunately, Due to the problem of faith and the special nature of the territory of the fallen empire, he failed to successfully join the Holy Light God system. The second time was when he traded the Holy Seed to Suyukai. At that time, Gao Qiang observed the situation inside the wall through the perspective of the Holy Seed, but the Lord of Holy Light noticed it. Now, it is the third time, and it is also the closest time Gao Qiang has been to him. Suddenly, the Lord of Holy Light opened his eyes. At the moment when he opened his eyes, the world in front of Gao Qiang turned white, and the people around him disappeared without a trace at the same time. Is it an illusion again? As soon as this thought came to mind, Gao Qiang denied this conjecture. The current situation seems to be a little different from the root vine. The Lord of Holy Light cast his eyes on Gao Qiang and was silent for a moment. I didn't expect that the first thing I saw after waking up would be his eyes. After a puzzling sentence, the Lord of Holy Light looked at Gao Qiang's appearance. Sit down. As the Lord of Holy Light finished speaking, a chair appeared behind Gao Qiang, forcing Gao Qiang to sit down. At the same time, the world composed purely of light suddenly changed, and finally formed a scene similar to a chapel. Holy light is not just light, it can also be everything you perceive. The Lord of Holy Light did not sit down. His figure stood aside, just like a huge statue. No, he was originally a statue. Since all the pictures took shape, he stopped talking and seemed to return to his original appearance. Gao Qiang currently had no idea what the Lord of Holy Light was up to, so he could only continue to watch patiently. The bells of the chapel rang a moment later. Faces without faces walked in from the door of the chapel, and filled every seat stiffly like machines. As the sacred music played, Gao Qiang's seat was moved to the pulpit of the chapel. Behind Gao Qiang, he could even hear the dripping sound of the baptismal pool clearly. All the blank faces looked at Gao Qiang in unison, as if, were on a pilgrimage. Just when Gao Qiang thought that this was a strange ceremony, suddenly, the reminder sound of the war game appeared in Gao Qiang's ears. You have received the blessing of the Lord of Holy Light, Sunday. Sunday. Effect, the Lord's glory shines on you like a corona, and all paladin units, whether affiliated with hostile or friendly lords, will be forced to have 70 points of initial loyalty to you. Ah! Gao Qiang opened his mouth. What just happened? The Lord of Holy Light blessed him. This seems to be wrong, right? Not to mention that data deleted and the Lord of Holy Light do not exist in the same pantheon. Even if they are in the same pantheon, the snow god has not blessed him yet. And what is his relationship with the Lord of Holy Light? There is no relationship at all. Is this blessing too casual? Gao Qiang looked at the Lord of Holy Light with a strange look. But the Lord of Holy Light waved his hand, and the vision just disappeared without a trace. Gao Qiang returned to the white space again. I know you may have a lot of questions, but don't ask them first, the Lord of Holy Light suddenly said. Somehow, after putting aside the various visions just now, Gao Qiang actually heard a smile from the Lord of Holy Light at this moment. But looking closely, the face of the Lord of Holy Light, which was completely covered by the hood, seemed to be only holy. The joking tone just now was as if it was not said by him. My awakening time is quite limited, so I will make it short, the Lord of Holy Light said. I don't know if time has smoothed out the edges of that person. But the disappearance of victory has gradually awakened the ancient gods from their hazy dreams. Although their and my consciousness are still hazy, it's not far from returning to the old days. Seeing the Lord of Holy Light finish his words in a confused manner, Gao Qiang asked, what do you mean? You don't know. It seemed to be a question, but it also seemed to be an affirmative tone. This time, Gao Qiang clearly saw that the corners of the Lord of Holy Light's mouth under his hood were curled up with a smile. It seems that the long river of time has washed away more than just us. The Lord of Holy Light raised his hand, and seeing that the giant eye behind Gao Qiang did not move, he continued to wave at Gao Qiang. Gao Qiang suddenly found that there seemed to be a lot more pictures in his mind. In a wild land, hundreds of races are confronting each other, without iron, firearms, or city walls. There are only terrifying gods one after another. There is the Lord of the Forest who connects the sky and the earth like a pillar, and the God of Lava who can scorch thousands of miles of scorched earth with a wave of his hand. This kind of power seems not to exist in a second-level war game at all. They are just background boards. Gao Qiang knew it clearly. All the gods as powerful as those in the picture did not exist when this war game started. Their status should be worse than that of the Lord of Holy Light, who has fallen into a deep sleep. They may even be in a state of extinction. Wait. Gao Qiang suddenly frowned. As the picture in his mind turned, all the gods who had just appeared fell down. In the picture that the Lord of Holy Light wanted him to see, the whole world became extremely silent. All civilizations were abandoned. There was no life, let alone gods. There was only a big eyeball rooted in the sky, curiously and ignorantly looking at the world. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 123. The image of big eyes just flashed by. Soon, the dead land gradually gave birth to life, and the breath of new civilization once again appeared on this land. The scene ended, Gao Qiang opened his eyes and looked towards the Lord of Holy Light. Show yourself these pictures, what is he trying to express? The Lord of Holy Light asked. The gods do not exist in the world. The death of victory is like opening the Pandora's box. Do you know what will happen when the gods wake up? Gao Qiang shook his head. Then before I fall asleep, let you witness what the gods look like after they wake up. The figure of the Lord of Holy Light gradually disappeared. At the last moment of dissipation, the world constructed by the Holy Light suddenly fell into black and white. A terrifying scene appeared in front of Gao Qiang. Just outside his own territory, majestic figures towered high in the sky. The god of life, the god of trickery, the god of war, and a large number of other distinctive gods from all walks of life are present there. The ground is a sea of blood. The refugees outside the Wangchuan River have been slaughtered. The blood flows into the Wangchuan River and will not disappear for a long time. At the same time, the fog that had always shrouded the Wangchuan River completely dissipated. Wangchuan completely lost its breath and fell on the river bank. Only a broken fishing rod lay quietly at her feet. The fire and thunder array was flattened, and voices shouting for death were heard from almost everywhere in the wall of size. Gao Qiang can only be protected in the old shrine, quietly waiting for death. It wasn't until the old shrine was destroyed and an aura full of absurdity emerged from the shrine that the scene came to an abrupt end. Don't forget, they hate you and have always hated you. The voice of the Lord of Holy Light became more and more ethereal until it disappeared. Call. The picture disappeared and Gao Qiang's surrounding vision returned to normal. He turned and looked around. Bai Hexio's expression was normal, and Wen Ziyi and others obviously didn't notice anything strange about the Lord of Holy Light. Wen Ziyi even smiled and asked Gao Qiang, "How does it feel?" Gao Qiang opened his personal panel and took a look. In the personal panel, an item related to Sephiroth V has been changed. Kabbalah Sephiroth V Severity. Effect 1, only once per game, the existence summoned by you has a probability of obtaining an incentive effect, and all attributes are increased by 70%. Effect 2, you will be blessed, and all beings with the same origin as you can sense your location. The source of reverse Kabbalah has been successfully purified, which means that this source of matter is completely out of the control of the mother tree. From now on, Sephiroth will never return to the embrace of the mother tree. Asher is indeed not playing any tricks here. According to the current situation, Even if she no longer invites Gaoqiang, Gaoqiang can choose to directly become the son of God according to the reward offered by the saint. Ixier casually took the water glass handed over by the leader, took a sip, and asked Gaoqiang with a smile. By the way, did you see anything just now? She is in a good mood. Things went quite smoothly today. After winning the 2 essences of the Kabbalah Tree of Life in a row, and continuing this progress, the Kabbalah Tree of Life will not be far away from withering. Facing Ixier's question, Gaoqiang had no need to hide anything and casually mentioned what he had just met with the Lord of Holy Light. Hearing that Gaoqiang saw the Lord of Holy Light, Ixier didn't react at first. After all, whence ability comes from God's blessing, and it is not difficult to understand that seeing God while using it is not difficult to understand. Until Gaoqiang told him about the blessing from the Lord of Holy Light, all paladins had 70 points of initial loyalty to him. Puff. Ahil squirted out a mouthful of water. The corners of his mouth twitched, and Ixier's eyelids jumped as he watched Gaoqiang. Gaoqiang may not realize how incredible this blessing is. Although there is a special unit called Paladin in the Holy Light God system, but generally the paladins recruited by lords only have a fixed loyalty of 60 points. Don't look at Gaoqiang's 70 points of loyalty, which is not that high. Aisier had no doubt that if Gaoqiang walked out of the cathedral now and shouted, he might not be able to change the hands of the paladin under his command. What a godbreaker, Ixiel muttered in a low voice. I can give you this kind of blessing, so I might as well give the divine system to others. Ah! Because the voice that Ixier just muttered was very low, Gaoqiang didn't hear it clearly. Okay, okay. Ixier didn't let Gaoqiang continue talking. After hearing the blessing of Sunday, she was not interested in hearing the rest. Now that your hidden danger has been resolved, you might as well come and participate in our combat meeting. Combat meeting. Ixier nodded slightly, suddenly seemed to think of something, and smiled softly. Speaking of which, you should also run into some acquaintances. I don't know who Ixier was referring to, but Gaoqiang didn't refuse. After all, the other party helped him solve a problem, and this face still has to be sold. What's more, in this war game, the saints are powerful allies in every sense. Deal with the traces of sacrifices in underground facilities. Ixier took Gaoqiang out of the underground and came to the top of the cathedral. Here is what a conference room looks like. Before a few people arrived, many lords from the human race had been waiting for a long time. Seeing Isil, the lords belonging to the saints immediately stood up and bowed slightly. My lady saint. Ahir nodded. Only then did the Lord of the Saints take his seat again. Gaoqiang narrowed his eyes and looked at Ixier, who had his back turned to him. After facing many people, a leader's aura naturally appeared in her. Compared with the Holy Sun that Gaoqiang had seen before, Ixier's aura at the moment seemed to be the temperament that this position should have. Instructing people to bring out 2 more chairs, Ixier took Wenz and Gaoqiang to sit at the main seats in the conference room. Upon seeing this, many lords immediately looked at Wenzi and Gaoqiang with their eyes. Most of the high-ranking personnel in the Holy Light God system knew Isil. As a saint of saints, and also a saint of the Holy Light God system in this war game, Isil is the only and well-deserved talker of the Holy Light God system. But no one knew the other 2 young men who were on equal footing with Ixer. Oh, by the way, let me introduce it to you. Ixier stretched out his hand to gesture towards Gaoqiang. This is the holder of Sephiroth, and he is also the lord besieged by the 5 elements god system. He seems to have killed that little one. As he said that, Ahil recalled it for a few seconds, but did not remember the name. Forget it, it's not important. One person died anyway. It's good for everyone to know. After listening to what Isil said, the Lord of the 5 Elements God system stood up with an ugly expression. Why is he here? Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Me. Chapter 124. Faced with AICR's indifference. As people who experienced it firsthand, the lords of the five elements god system have a special feeling about Gaoqiang. Through the information learned from the pilgrims, they naturally know that the monster that killed the Son of God is inseparable from Gaoqiang. Therefore, they can't say what kind of emotions they have towards Gaoqiang at the moment. Is it anger? Is it hostility? Or fear? Anyway, it definitely doesn't include shame. This man killed our Son of God. A lord of the five elements god system said. Outside the meeting room, Baihejan was lying on the door to eavesdrop, and the safety of the musket in his hand had been opened. Ah, what a courageous person! On the other side, Juluo had dragged the guard who was knocked down to one side. Gaoqiang went to attend the meeting alone, and the two were naturally worried. This is exactly what they guessed. As soon as they entered the meeting room, there was trouble trying to find Gaoqiang. Don't rush to do it. Juluo pressed down the musket in Baihexio's hand. Listen again. By the way, remember what was said just now. Juluo's mouth curled up a smile. If the situation in the meeting room escalates, it won't be too late for them to rush in. As the discussion of the lords of the five elements god system became more and more intense, Eixier suddenly interrupted everyone. Squinting his eyes, Eixier asked a question. So the purpose of our meeting is to quarrel? Sorry, Lady Saint, some lords seem to want to argue. But it's not appropriate for you to appear in this occasion with such a person. Yes, that person's behavior may be biased, but it's not a capital crime. What's more, this. The lord who spoke glanced at Gaoqiang. This person killed not only the Son of God, but several lords who were the backbone of the conflict also died in that conflict. Really? Eixier leaned on the table and propped up his chin. Which backbones? Tell me their names, maybe I know them. From his tone, Eixier seemed to be getting impatient. The lords of the Holy Light God system also looked at the outsiders of the five elements God system with warning eyes. People's joys and sorrows are not the same. They only thought it was funny and sad for everything that happened to the five elements god system. The lord who just spoke was speechless for a moment. Because he knew that Eixier could not know the names of those people. Maybe they are the backbones in this war. But in the entire Saints organization, they are still just ordinary members of the Saints. Those with the status of sons of God are candidates for high-level positions. How could people remember the names of members like them who could not even get the status of sons of God? Why are you not talking? Eixier said lightly. How many lords who stayed behind died in the fall of the five elements god system, and what a miserable end those reinforcements who entered this war game through the request for help. And all this comes from your dereliction of duty. Now facing those foreign races who slaughtered your compatriots, you didn't say a word of complaint, but instead blamed your own people. Oh, right. Eixier pointed at Gaoqiang who was sitting next to him. This person will become the son of the saint in the near future, and is also the object that the saint is preparing to focus on training. Listening to Eicier's teachings, the lords of the five elements god system lowered their heads in depression. They didn't have any complaints about the foreign races. The fall of the five elements god system this time caused the logistics of the lords present to collapse completely. If it weren't for the relief of the Holy Light god system, the scale of the tens of thousands of troops would not have been able to stay. I think I understand what Lord Eixier means. A lord of the five elements god system suddenly spoke. Looking at Wenzi and Gaoqiang, since you are on an equal footing with the saint lady, you two should be the next new saint sons, right? If I guess correctly, one of the agendas of this meeting should be to transfer our command to the two saint sons. That's right, Eixier nodded. There are more than 1,000 lords from the five elements god system who have entered the Holy Light god system, which has exceeded the upper limit of my command ability. In order to ensure the timeliness of the dispatch, I plan to appoint a temporary Saint son to be responsible for the command of the Saint forces in this war game. We have no objection to this, the Lord of the Five Elements God system obeyed. But I and the more than 200 lords I represent are only willing to obey this person's orders. He pointed his finger at Wenzi, who had been silent. After him, the representatives of the other Five Elements God system also expressed their opinions. No one wants their boss to be an enemy not long ago, and they are no exception. Aisier did not speak, but just signaled Gao Qiang with his eyes. Gao Qiang shook his head and said softly, "That's it?" Even though he has not yet awakened, Gao Qiang does not think highly of these arms of the Five Elements God system. Perhaps compared to those small lords, their arms are good or even top-notch. But Gao Qiang has also eaten fine bran. These medieval war arms are not even as good as the obsidian champion infantry knights of the Stone Age in terms of attributes. It doesn't matter whether you eat this kind of coarse grain or not. Since Gao Qiang said so, Aisier quickly turned the page on this matter. Because Aisier controlled the topic very well. After learning that they didn't have to obey Gao Qiang's command, many lords breathed a sigh of relief, completely forgetting that the original topic was to hold Gao Qiang responsible. As for the next topic, Aisier spread a map behind him. This is a simple map that only includes various forces in the east, and it is very simple and rough. Compared with the world map in Gao Qiang's hand, it is definitely incomparable. But it is definitely good enough. Pointing to the location of the Five Elements God system, Aisier continued to expose the scar. Due to the fall of the Five Elements God system, the defense line arranged by our saints in this war game has a gap. Although other races have temporarily withdrawn, they should not give up such a good opportunity, Aisier said meaningfully. Because the saints continue to send personnel to this war game in order to encircle and suppress the source carriers. The advantage of the human race in this war game is very large. It is not so easy for the foreign race to find the moment when the human race has a flaw. I don't know if you think that now is a good time to send us out in one fell swoop, Aisier asked with narrowed eyes. If I were to command the other side, I would have given up all development and expansion to prepare for war. Because this may be the only chance to send humans out in this war game. Gao Qiang was thoughtful after listening to Aisier's words. You mean, there is a high possibility of a full-scale war next? Aisier did not deny it, but just pointed out the imprecise part of Gao Qiang's words. It is many races targeting humans together. Total war. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Mishida De. Chapter 125. Hearing the term total war, many lords fell silent. They fully understood the meaning of this term. Once a total war breaks out, it may not mean the end of the game, but it will definitely end with the withdrawal of a certain race or force. If it is true as Aisier said, all races are about to launch a total war against humans. Gao Qiang's little grudge is almost not worth mentioning. Aisier's eyes swept from one lord to another. He did not say much, but directly gave a piece of information. According to the news from our intelligence network, there are reasons for the current retreat of the various tribes. The defectors from the Shadow tribe said that the shrines of the God of Darkness and the God of Trickery have undergone unusual movements. The shrine of the God of Darkness is now shrouded in black fog all day long, and only some core lords of the Shadow tribe have the power to enter the shrine. And in the forest outside the shrine of the God of Trickery, a few strange laughs are heard from time to time. It is said that all the Shadow tribe soldiers close to the shrine have been strengthened to varying degrees. Although we cannot understand the details of other tribes, according to speculation, it should be similar to the situation of the Shadow tribe. Gao Qiang's eyes flickered. Listening to the information given by Aisier, he remembered the scene he had just seen in the basement. According to the words of the Lord of Holy Light, the sleeping gods are waking up from a long sleep. So are the unusual movements of the shrines now a precursor to their awakening? If this news is true, Then what about the scene that the Lord of Holy Light showed him later? Gao Qiang's face darkened. Those scenes are not a good omen. The awakening of the righteous gods does not bring prosperity and peace, but a war of blood and fire. Of course, that is not important. What is important is the blood in it, which represents oneself. If everything develops as described by the Lord of Holy Light, whoever wakes up first will take the absolute initiative. Seeing that Aisier was still issuing combat strategies to various lords, Gao Qiang simply closed his eyes and cast his eyes on his last holy land. Suyukei's territory is also the only holy land that has not been destroyed at present. The Holy Light God system protects its rear very well, and Suyukei will not be threatened at all. If this last holy land is destroyed, will it cause himself to enter the awakening state? Gao Qiang was silent for a while. But then he gave up the idea. Because no matter which description, the destruction of the Holy Land will only greatly anger data deleted. It seems that there is no inevitable connection between the Holy Land and the awakening of the Empire. And unlike the last war game, this time, the destruction of the miracle building will not cause the Empire to awaken. So what is the awakening method in this war game? Do I have to wait for the irresistible enemy to break through my territory before I can passively awaken? Or, I have overlooked something. Recalling the miracle building again, Gao Qiang always felt that he had vaguely grasped some key information. Gao Qiang Ixier suddenly said. Gao Qiang raised his head and saw that the lords present were looking at him. Because your territory is in the west, once a full-scale war breaks out, other races will no longer pay attention to the west. And what you have to do is to integrate the forces that can be integrated in the west. Is that okay? While saying this, Ixier privately shared some information with Gao Qiang. In this war game, a large number of neutral units can be used. As long as they are recruited into their own pantheon, the power of those believers will be directly used by themselves and others. In terms of resource consumption and time cost, these are much more cost-effective than recruiting people. In fact, Aisier did the same. Although it cannot be seen in the current meeting room. But once you go to the troops of the Holy Light God system, you will find that there are servants of various gods in the troops. Those are all believers of small and medium-sized gods who have been swallowed up by the Holy Light God system since the start of the war game. In Aisier's view, taking advantage of the current downfall of various positive gods in the West, Gao Qiang copying her own practices should be the wisest choice. This is also her compensation measure for the disobedience of the five elements god system. At least, it must be ensured that Gao Qiang has enough troops to command, so that they can be used in the full-scale war that may break out in the future. Gao Qiang nodded slightly and proposed to leave first. It has nothing to do with Aisier's suggestion. It's just that at this time, Gao Qiang suddenly thought of a possibility. It seems that there is a small detail that he has been induced to ignore. And this detail, he has to go back to the old shrine to confirm. Aisier did not refuse. After watching Gao Qiang walk out of the meeting room, he continued to arrange the battle strategy. Dong. After closing the door of the meeting room, Gao Qiang just turned around and bumped into Bai Hexio's head. Covering his head and taking 2 steps back, Gao Qiang looked at Bai Hexio and Zhu Luo outside the door and asked in confusion, "Why are you here?" Bai Hexio's eyes drifted to the side. "I said I was lost, Lord, do you believe it?" Lost. Watching the 2 paladins guarding the door faint, Gao Qiang looked at Bai Hexio suspiciously. "That's all. I didn't dwell on this for long." Gao Qiang instead raised a question. "What exactly is written in our Bible? How do I know this?" Bai Hexio shrugged, "I haven't watched it since I was a kid." After reacting, Bai Hexio looked at Gao Qiang strangely. "Lord, when did you become interested in that thing? Haven't you seen it?" Gao Qiang rubbed his chin. It seems that Shash's career introduction also mentioned that as a saint, She has never opened the Bible or read a single word in it. As a religious cult, or as a believer in God, the people under his command are undoubtedly unqualified. Let's go, call Shasha and the others, let's go back. Hearing what Gao Qiang said, Bai Hexio and Zhu looked at each other and nodded. The motorcade soon left the cathedral. On the way through the city wall this time, Gao Qiang did not encounter any obstruction. There was even a trace of solemnity in the way the paladin looked at the convoy. It's just that Gao Qiang, who was not thinking about it at all, didn't notice it at all. On the way back, Gao Qiang also received several messages. One of them is the defeat of the Victory God system. The Stasis Holy Power has achieved its war goal against the victorious God system, punishment, hereby notified. After a long period of tug-of-war with the Genman Mother Tree, even though the war exhaustion of the Victory God system increased quite slowly, the will to fight was finally wiped out. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 126. Is this a good thing? Gao Qiang didn't know. Because not long after the Victory God system completely fell, he received all kinds of intelligence from Izir. The demise of the Victory God system seemed to be a fuse. The soldiers of various god systems and races have begun to wander around other sections of the city wall arranged by the saints. Although the total war that Izir expected has not yet broken out. But the military strength of those guys has been visibly improved. Gao Qiang knows it well. The reason why the total war has not yet broken out may be related to the prophecy of the Lord of Holy Light. The high-level lords of those races should have learned that the gods are about to wake up. Obviously, the time point of the total war they chose is after the gods wake up. And this kind of power has nothing to do with them. Their technology tree has not been improved, so naturally they will not touch the bottom line of the fallen empire, and the war of vigilance will not be launched. So, now it depends on who wakes up first. Gao Qiang must not want the scene predicted by the Lord of Holy Light to happen. Although the fallen empire has a chance to wake up when it is suppressed to the limit. But at the end of the picture, Gao Qiang saw himself. He didn't know what would happen to him. Because the righteous gods had destroyed the old shrines in the picture. Although the possibility of survival is very high, Gao Qiang didn't want to gamble on the slight probability of death. When passing by the land of the god of mountains, Gao Qiang accidentally glanced at the mountains in the distance. The size of the two gods Zhenshan and Hanyu has been getting bigger and bigger, which is obviously abnormal. In the intelligence, even the original gods should not have such a growth rate. Maybe, it has something to do with their destruction of the righteous gods' pantheon? Gao Qiang frowned. These days, the whole world seems to be developing at an accelerated pace, which makes Gao Qiang vaguely have the illusion that he is stagnating and regressing. The bad atmosphere permeates this war game. At this point in time, I am afraid that only Shasha can still eat happily. Fortunately, the speed of the armed carriage is still fast enough. Before the undercurrent broke out, Gao Qiang finally returned to the territory. Relieved for the time being, Gao Qiang walked directly to the location of the old shrine. Zhu looked at Gao Qiang's back, his eyes flickered slightly, and he followed him. Lord. In front of the old shrine, Xin Qi smiled and greeted Gao Qiang's arrival. You are back so soon. Did you have fun playing outside? Gao Qiang paused, stood in front of the shrine, and looked at Xin Qi quietly. After a long time, Gao Qiang asked a strange question. What is written in the Bible? Oh, you mean that? Xin Qi clapped his hands and waved casually, it's just some red tape, not worth mentioning. Gao Qiang narrowed his eyes slightly, this is not what a high priest should say. Xin Qi was silent for a while. He did not rush to refute Gao Qiang, but asked a new question. Why do you suddenly want to know what's in the Bible? Because a friend told me something. Our enemies are about to wake up, and the target they hate most after waking up is us. Listening to Gao Qiang's answer, Xin Qi showed an expression of sudden enlightenment. Then a calm smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, and he made way for the figure blocking the shrine. Since you want to know so much, why don't you go and see it yourself? But if you think the Bible is what you want to find, you will be disappointed. Being taken to the dusty library by Xin Qi. Xin Qi picked up a book, stretched out his hand and wiped the dust off the cover, and then handed the book to Gao Qiang. What is recorded in the Bible is just our history. That's all. That's why I think it's just some boring things, and no one would want to read it. According to what Xin Qi said, Gao Qiang also recalled. The weapons used by Bai Hexio and others were basically taken and used in the dusty warehouse. Tens of thousands of years have not brought any changes, and there is even a slight regression. History has long been forgotten, stagnant in the long river of time. Perhaps this is the meaning of the stagnant holy power. But Gao Qiang still opened the book in his hand. Just as Zinke said, these so-called Bibles are just history books. But when he saw the first sentence in the book, Gao Qiang was attracted by the content of the book. Manpower is limited, but the power of God is boundless. This does not sound like something that can be said with the arrogance of the fallen empire. But as he continued to read, Gao Qiang found that this was not a flattery, but a statement of fact. In this book, it is written that the saints have not discovered the intelligence that has been in this war game for so long. In this war game, gods are not restricted by the technology tree. Perhaps it is because they are background boards. The technology tree of all races can only develop to the peak of the second-level battlefield, but gods are not. Enjoying the offerings of believers, gods can go higher and farther than imagined. The third level, the fourth level, and even the eighth and ninth level. If there are extreme situations, these gods may be comparable to the lords in the infinite battlefield. For a second-level war game, they are really too much. Although these gods are just background boards now, what about 10,000 years ago? 10,000 years ago, the stagnation of the holy power had not yet stagnated. They had already discovered this horrifying thing. At the beginning, the gods were just leaders elected by all things. But as the believers of various gods became more and more fanatical, the gap between gods and humans seemed to be gradually widening. Gradually, the righteous gods occupied the sky, and the primitive gods galloped on the land. The world simply could not accommodate so many gods. War was almost imminent. At that time, the gods were close to the top of the technology tree of all living beings, and some gods had even broken through the upper limit of this world. Under the trampling of the gods, all things that did not believe in gods were driven to the most remote and desolate place, underground. And the ground and the sky are the battlefields of the gods. At that time, the holy power of stasis was still one of the strongest pantheons in the world. A part of the writing in the book was crossed out. Gao Qiang only knew that for some reason, his territory had persuaded data deleted. The power of the old days completely descended, sweeping every inch of land like a natural disaster. At the same time, the former wall of size also participated in this rebellious war against the gods. In order to prevent the gods from surpassing humans, most of the gods were slaughtered, and their books and teachings were burned. Only a few gods survived in a miserable way, and they were terrified day and night about what happened 10,000 years ago in their sleep. And those sleeping gods, they became what they are today, the true gods. After doing all this, in order to limit the development of data deleted, the ancestors of the Wall of Size chose to remain silent and no longer care about worldly affairs. And gradually became the current holy power of stasis. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 127. After closing the book in his hand, Gao Qiang understood what the Lord of Holy Light meant. No wonder the first thing the righteous God wanted to deal with after awakening was himself. Everything was caused by the history of the fallen empire for tens of thousands of years. 10,000 years of history brought not only sedimentation, but also trouble. The hatred of the old days has been deposited until now. When the two awaken at the same time in the new era, it is natural that the enemies will be particularly jealous when they meet. However, among these histories, Gao Qiang has not yet seen any way to awaken the empire. At this time, Zinke suddenly smiled and asked, "How do you feel after reading our history? Is it that there is nothing you want to find?" "Not necessarily." Before Gao Qiang spoke, another voice came from the side. Zinke turned his head and saw Zhulogo sitting on a small pile of books, flipping through the classics in his hand. While reading, he nodded frequently in approval. What our ancestors did is really shocking. If everyone recalls this history again. When the gods descend, I think everyone will not refuse to pick up the swords and guns of their ancestors again, right? Zhulogo closed the book slightly, walked to Gao Qiang's side, and handed the book over. "Lord, do you remember what an old traveler once said? When we wake up, the whole world will change for us. After all, only we ourselves have forgotten our past horror. To outsiders, we have never changed." Gao Qiang gently took the book handed over by Zhulogo and looked down. 18 Cooking Methods of Primitive Gods, revised edition of the 39th issue. Wait, is this what Zhulogo was just reading? Gao Qiang glanced at the history book in his hand, and then glanced at the recipe that Zhulogo had just handed over, and couldn't help but sigh at the diversity of the books in the shrine's library. At the same time, why did he have a strange feeling? He, Zhulogo, and Zinke seemed to be talking about their own things, and their brain circuits were not connected. However, the awakening method that Zhulogo mentioned is not impossible. Thinking of the last time when the Stonehenge was blown up, Sasha's eyes lost their brilliance. If this recipe is given to Sasha to spread, when the gods come, his ingredients attack the city. Gao Qiang didn't know whether others could awaken, but Sasha might have to awaken alone. Ahem. He coughed twice and calmly put 18 cooking methods of primitive gods into his arms. Gao Qiang took the history book again and looked up at Zinke. Maybe I didn't find what I wanted, but from another perspective, I found it. At least he confirmed one thing. The hatred of the righteous gods for data deleted is no less than their hatred for the fallen empire. Destroying the old shrines will lead to natural disasters. So, can the so-called natural disasters be used to fight against the many righteous gods in the East? After all, in the picture given by the Lord of Holy Light that Gao Qiang saw, the shrine was destroyed after the territory. If the time point of the destruction of the shrine was set before the fall of the territory, the ending might be different. First of all, I need to confirm that everyone in the territory should not care about this shrine, right? Gao Qiang turned his head and asked Zhulogo. Zhulogo nodded and asked back, if everyone really cares, how could this shrine be abandoned for tens of thousands of years? If you don't care about this place, destroying it will not lead to the awakening of the fallen empire. In this case, how about we demolish this place? Gao Qiang asked Zhulogo. Zhulogo's mouth twitched. Glancing at Xin Qi, Zhulogo quietly pulled Gao Qiang aside and whispered in Gao Qiang's ear, "Lord, have you learned bad things from Sasha? I remember that Sasha was the only one who would conspire loudly before." While listening to Zhulogo's words, Gao Qiang's eyes were always paying attention to Xin Qi's expression. When he said this, Zinke's face did darken for a moment. But then he was not very excited. With such a bland expression of emotion, if even he, the great priest, was not prepared to protect the old shrine, then the old shrine was indeed as Gao Qiang thought, it could be destroyed directly by himself. Seeing Gao Qiang walking out of the shrine, Zinke's eyes moved, but there was no movement to stop him. Just as he showed, he really didn't care about the destruction of the shrine. After leaving the shrine, Gao Qiang immediately found Bai Hexiu. If you want to say who can dismantle the old shrine the fastest, the knight of the church is definitely not the one who can do it. It was Bai Hexiu, the commander-in-chief of the witch hunters. When he heard that Gao Qiang was going to destroy the old shrine, his first reaction was not anger, but surprise. It was the first time he heard that a believer of God was going to dismantle his own shrine. What was this kind of immoral excitement? He shook his head and shook off the strange idea from his mind. Bai Hexiu walked into the dilapidated weapons warehouse with Gao Qiang in high spirits. This matter sounded much more interesting than accompanying Gao Qiang to the east for the war. In the warehouse, a large number of useful and useless weapons and equipment were thrown here. But it was obvious that those small gadgets were not what Bai Hexiu wanted to find. If he wants to destroy the old shrine, he needs a good thing like a landmine. Boom! With Bai Hexiu's gentle push, the door of a compartment in the warehouse collapsed. After a moment of dust, Gao Qiang saw what Bai Hexiu was looking for. Explosives, the purest explosives. Neatly placed in the box, the explosives piled up like a hill. Gao Qiang walked forward and looked at the explosives in the box. These explosives are long red tubes, interwoven with fuses. On the other side, Bai Hexiu also came up. Gently stroking the middle of the tubes, Bai Hexiu laughed. I didn't expect it, I didn't expect that these good things would be used by us again one day. Detonator. Introduction, it is immoral to blow up a mountain, okay, but there must be something to blow up. Pick up a detonator in each hand, Bai Hexiu's eyes are shining, which boy can resist the temptation of explosion? The witch hunter's ancestral teachings tell me that this thing is the most brutal weapon in the world. There is no problem that cannot be solved by explosives. As long as the equivalent is large enough, even gods will be killed for you to see. After a while, Gao Qiang looked at the densely packed detonators and explosives that filled the entire old shrine, and his mouth opened wide. Are we being too extreme? Gao Qiang couldn't help asking. He was prepared to destroy the old shrine and release the natural disaster. Looking at the lethal amount of explosives placed by Bai Hexiu, he doubted whether the natural disaster could see the sun tomorrow. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Mi Shi De. Chapter 128. At this time, the wall of size became bustling for the first time in a long time. Many people came out of their houses and looked at the scene outside the old shrine curiously. It seemed that Gao Qiang's current action successfully aroused their interest. Don't worry. Bai Hexiu completely misunderstood Gao Qiang's meaning. Seeing so many people looking at him, he thought Gao Qiang was worried that the explosives were not powerful enough. For explosives, there is a saying in the ancestral precepts. We never talk about quality, we only talk about equivalent. No. Gao Qiang's mouth twitched. It was because he only talked about equivalent that he wanted to say whether the equivalent was a little too much. However, before Gao Qiang could say something like why don't we withdraw some of the equivalent, a witch hunter had already walked out of the shrine. Behind him was Xueran holding a small statue of the snow god. Xueran's eyes were full of confusion at this moment. Ah, what is she doing? Why is she running? Did a bad guy break in? Putting Xueran aside, the witch hunter walked up to Gao Qiang and Bai Hexiu and reported, we checked carefully several times, and there is no one inside. It's just that the high priest has not been found yet. No problem. Bai Hexiu interrupted the witch hunter, turned his head, and laughed under the gaze of everyone with black lines on their heads. Just blow it up. Boom. It is unknown how much explosives were put in and detonated by the fuse. A small mushroom cloud appeared above the wall of size. Art is an explosion. Bai Hexiu's obsessed face froze in mid-air before he said half of his words. In front of Gao Qiang, the world fell into stillness. You witnessed the end of a miracle, and witnessing the end of a miracle is a miracle in itself. Since you are in the second level world, your miracle path will be upgraded to second level. The next moment, a male voice came from the mushroom cloud. Tell me your wish. If you listen carefully, the voice seems to be 80% similar to Zinke, but not exactly the same. My wish? Gao Qiang did not speak immediately. The miracle path is indeed very special. Unlike other linear paths, almost every miracle path has unique abilities. Therefore, there will be some abilities with very strange uses, such as the estimate Gao Qiang obtained from the Stone Age. This time, he wanted to make his words as simple and short as possible. It would be best if there were no ambiguities at all. At the same time, it must be considered that the strength of each path is roughly the same. If it is the same as the bonus given by the second level path, what can the miracle do? Gao Qiang thought for a moment, and first of all, the wish of increasing attributes must be abandoned first. Take the killing god path as an example. If you make this wish now, the ability you will most likely get is a 20% increase in the combat effectiveness of all the people in the territory, which is the same as the bonus of the killing god path from the first level to the second level. But if the bonus is only this little, even if it is a noble percentage bonus, it is inevitably a bit tasteless. This kind of bonus can be completely compensated by Juluo's food, so there is no need to consume the wish of the path. In this way, his wish must be abstract enough, and it is best to match the characteristics of the fallen empire. For example, more reasons for war, or awakening methods. After careful consideration, it seems unrealistic to directly obtain the awakening method for the second level wish. Gao Qiang already has a plan in mind. I want more reasons for war and the ability to explore freely when my territory is not awakened. The voice in the mushroom cloud seems to be thinking about the feasibility of achieving this wish. After an unknown period of time, a metal with a big eyeball flew out of the mushroom cloud and stopped in front of Gao Qiang. Your wish has been fulfilled. Taking advantage of this moment, Gao Qiang immediately opened the personal interface. Miracle, second level. Below the path, there is a new ability. Intervention. Introduction. You are always happy to point fingers at others who do not go your way, and try to erase their own unique style, and interfere with them to walk on the path you personally chose. Effect 1. At the beginning of each game, you can choose up to 3 lords who enter the game at the same time as you, and forcibly add the intervention buff. Effect 2. The lord you intervene will lose personal talents, lord paths, and territory types in this game. Effect 3. The lord you intervene will walk on the road you have paved, no longer cutting through the branches of the technology tree, and the speed of all technology research and development will be tripled. At the same time, you can give the intervention target outdated equipment that you no longer need, and your people will understand this. Effect 4. You cannot tolerate the failure of the path you choose, so always ensure the correctness of the path when the intervened target is in crisis. You get the war reason, punishment. Punishment war. People can make a lot of mistakes in their lives, but the biggest mistake they make is to offend us in ignorance, so someone must pay for our unhappiness. After Gao Qiang completely entered the second level miracle path, the forbidden images around him began to flow again. Baihexia finally finished saying that art is explosion. The next moment, the shock wave caused by the explosion of the large yield explosive swept around, blowing everyone's eyes. Wait until everything returns to calm. At the original location of the old shrine, there is only a flattened ruin. Woohoo! Baihexia waved his hand, seeming to be very satisfied with the power of the explosion. Gao Qiang looked at the shrine that had been flattened, and he was a little hesitant to speak. It's been so long and nothing has come out. Data deleted, it won't be really blown up, right? Fortunately, the war game prompt sound that came next made Gao Qiang relieved. In view of the fact that the old shrine was completely destroyed, the past natural disaster will return to this continent with power that the gods cannot match. just at the location where the detonator exploded just now. A series of black shadows seemed to gather in the ruins. Bihexio's laughter stopped abruptly. His expression quickly became serious, and in an instant, he raised his musket with both hands and fired 2 shots at the ruins. The 2 bullets hit the broken rocks blown out by the detonator, but it didn't seem to have any effect. In fact, because it felt the attack coming. The space above the ruins seemed a little unstable, as if some monster was about to emerge from the void. Until a dark, square, Q-version big cat-like rag jumped up from the ruins with its fur exploded, making a threatening sound. Whoa! You look directly at data delete, your SAN value add 10. Pa! In a corner of the ruins, Zinky, who was charred and tattered, covered his face with his hands. How can I make up this myth? Destroy it? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 129. Looking at the big cat shadow in the ruins of the shrine, Gao Qiang tilted his head, as if he hadn't reacted yet. However, the next moment, the cat shadow had already pounced on Gao Qiang. Whoa! Hey, you! Bihexio turned around and saw Gao Qiang being wrapped in a square black shadow. Looking at the gun in his hand, Bihexio couldn't help it for a moment, put the gun back to his waist, and then grabbed the black shadow. So soft. Touching data delete, there is no feeling of being very uncomfortable. On the contrary, data delete looks very smooth and has no hair. After touching it, it gives people a feeling of being wrapped in fur. This feeling is best experienced by Gao Qiang, who is wrapped in it. It's like being surrounded by a blanket, making people want to hug and fall asleep. Your hedonist talent is satisfied in this game. Your people's combat power against mythical units increases by 1%. Your hedonist talent is satisfied. The reminder sound of the war game sounded several times before it ended. When Gao Qiang came to his senses, he found that the people around him had surrounded him and were hugging data delete. That is, data delete is big enough, otherwise he really can't afford to be touched by so many people. Woo. Maybe there are too many people touching him. Data delete keeps making sounds of resistance. 2 big watery eyes emerged from the top of the block and looked towards the location of the ruins of the old shrine. Zinky saw this, pointed at himself, shrugged, and said he was powerless. Data delete can only express his threat by roaring. Woo! Meow. Suddenly, everyone stopped what they were doing and looked at data delete. Did he just shout something incredible? Data deleted paused, glanced at the corner of the block, and disappeared in a moment. Hey, what are you all doing here? Why don't you have food yet? I'm so hungry. At this time, Sasha's voice came from the side. Seeing Sasha coming with a sleepy look, everyone embarrassedly took their hands back from data deleted's body. Hey! Looking at the super tall black block, Sasha seemed to have not reacted yet. Reached out, pinched and sniffed. Soft. Is this thing a marshmallow? As she spoke, Sasha bit it. The black block jumped up under everyone's gaze, bouncing away into the distance. The marshmallow escaped. Sasha was stunned for a moment, and subconsciously licked her lips, as if she was still savoring the taste just now. Well, there is no taste. Boom. A book fell from the sky and hit Sasha's head hard. What is this? Sasha showed a brief confusion. It seems to be the Bible in the library. How did it appear here? Then she saw the title. 18 Cooking Methods of Primitive Gods, revised edition of the 39th issue. Gurgle. Sasha swallowed subconsciously. She opened the book and turned a few pages. Stir fry, steam, grill. Salivation has already flowed down the corners of Sasha's mouth. Hey, hey. It is worthy of the wisdom of the ancients and the power of words. The book has its own big kitchen, and the wisdom of the ancestors is not deceiving her. From the records in the book alone, she seemed to be able to feel how delicious these gods are. The only drawback is that the gods are so big that they cannot be stewed in one pot, even if they are halal and spicy. In short, one person cannot finish it. Sasha smiled strangely, and her eyes were already looking at other people around her. Let me introduce our food, our Bible. Bang. Ouch. Stop talking nonsense, Julio interrupted Sasha unhappily. The Lord was kidnapped by that big cube. Ah. Data deleted was faster than the armored carriage Gao Qiang had ridden before. In this time, Gao Qiang had been held hostage to the Huangchuan River. Where are you taking me? Gao Qiang couldn't help asking. Just when Gao Qiang thought Data deleted was going to take him across the river, he suddenly stopped. Gao Qiang got out of the dark and soft embrace and fell to the ground. When he stood up again, he looked up and met Huangchuan's empty expression. Gao Qiang was about to laugh twice, but he saw Huangchuan took out a fish from somewhere. The black shadow behind him instantly split into two oval little hands and took the fish. And suddenly a small mouth grew out, and he ate slowly. It was obviously a very scary scene, but for some reason, Gao Qiang felt unexpectedly warm. You face Data deleted, your sanity add 10. Your sincerity touched Data deleted, and you get a new blessing, eating fish. Eating fish. Introduction, Data deleted really likes the joy of eating fish blindly, and now he wants to share this joy with you. Effect 1, under the gaze of the Old One, you will receive the favor of the sea, and the damage to all marine life will be tripled. Effect 2, when you take marine life, the blessing of the Old One will be triggered again, all sand values will be restored, and you will not be able to enter a negative mental state for a short time. At this time, Data deleted suddenly stopped eating the fish and handed over the last bit of fish eagerly. Is this, share it with me, Gao Qiang hesitated. The blocky Data deleted shook up and down, as if to agree. Looking at the little bit of raw fish residue, Gao Qiang hesitated. He really has never eaten raw fish. I don't know what psychological drive Gao Qiang actually took a little bit of fish residue and put it in his mouth to chew. The taste is very strange. I don't know what kind of fish Huangchuan gave me. When I eat it in my mouth, it doesn't feel like eating raw meat, but like sucking some kind of cold jelly. Because there was only a little residue, Gao Qiang swallowed it all in 2 mouthfuls. You triggered the blessing of the old days, and you cannot enter a negative mental state for a short period of time. The reminder sound of the war game came. At the same time, there was a message from Aishir. Today is also a cute fairy, dear, are you there, dear? Speak seriously. Okay, dear, according to the information of the traders here, the trickery gods of the Shadow clan have been dispatched, dear. According to the trajectory of the action, the followers of the god of trickery will appear in the west, dear, be careful. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Mishida Di. Chapter 130. God of Trickery. Just as Gao Qiang was paying attention to the news from Ixir, he suddenly felt the ground shaking. Outside the thick fog of the Forgotten River, it seemed that some huge monster was gradually moving. Ouch! Data deleted's eyes rushed to the top of the block, and he looked at the direction of the fog in confusion, as if he was thinking about something. The next moment. Ouch! Data deleted hugged Gao Qiang into his arms again, and jumped towards the Forgotten River. A column of water was stirred up on the surface of the Forgotten River. Soon, Data deleted jumped out from the bottom of the river again. After several cycles, it was getting farther and farther away from the bank of the Forgotten River. At this moment, in the refugee gathering place outside the Forgotten River, Almost everyone looked at the two wild boars that blocked most of the sunlight like mountains with despair. The god of mountain guarding, the god of shaking the mountain. In less than half a month, their bodies have increased by more than 3 times. If you look closely at their eyes, you will find that their eyeballs are covered with a black turbidity. Now they seem to have no spirit, and they will only walk in a fixed direction in a daze. Go to your new habitat. A twisted little figure stood on the ear of the god of shaking mountains and whispered softly. On the backs of the two gods of shaking mountains and Janayu, which cannot be observed from the ground, a large number of Shadow Clan warriors gathered there. As for their original believers, they were naturally slaughtered. After repeating the hint in the ear of the god of shaking mountains, the twisted black shadow stood on the sky and showed its true appearance. An unclear face, a breath that distorts reality, and a dirty and worn cloak. He is the god worshipped in one of the temples controlled by the Shadow Clan. God of trickery. I didn't expect that the first one to wake up completely would be me. The god of trickery looked at the fog covering the forgotten river in the distance. The higher you stand, the more you can feel the horror of the fog. No matter how high the god of trickster raises himself, the fog, like a natural moat, lingers. It completely covers the wall of size, making it impossible for the outside world to observe the situation in Zhaoqiang's territory. But this also reveals a message to the god of trickster. That guy hasn't woken up yet. He once glanced at that existence inadvertently in ancient times. If he wakes up, the world will never be so peaceful. Then, the god of trickster raised his head slightly, revealing scarlet eyes under his cloak. Let him put an end to that traitor of the gods here. The new era can no longer accommodate antiques from the old days. As for the refugees who set up camps outside the forgotten river, the god of trickster just glanced at them and completely ignored them. A bunch of garbage, he doesn't care at all. Boom. The foot of the god of mountain suppression fell slowly but heavily, and the refugee camp, which had just shown a hint of prosperity, collapsed by 1/3 in an instant. The aftermath of the footsteps even caused a huge wave in the forgotten river. Until a huge black shadow emerged from the river. The god of mountain suppression, who was about to take another step, suddenly stopped moving. Even though his eyes were blinded, even though his 5 senses were deceived, he still felt that breath. That absurd and threatening breath. The god of trickster did not question the two gods why they stopped. He was staring at the creature that emerged from the river with his eyes wide open in disbelief. A mass of monsters like black mud, with dozens of thick tentacles connected to his body. In addition, there were countless tiny tentacles like fluff that kept shaking. Oh my god, how could such a weird thing appear in this world? You're awake. The god of tricks showed an awkward but polite smile. I admit that I was a little loud just now. Before he finished speaking, the god of tricks found that the twisted black mud was approaching him. At the cost of half the water level of the forgotten river, the size of the mud had increased to the same size as the two gods who controlled the mountains and shook the mountains. Millions of malicious eyes opened from the mud. All the refugees who looked into the eyes couldn't help but kneel down. Lord, it's the real Lord. A series of crazy whispers came from the ground. Even the old traveler who first promoted the name of the holy power of stasis fell to the ground at this moment, emitting a series of weird laughs. He's back, he's really back. Myths and legends are true, and the order and rules of this world will be reshaped. Listening to the endless whispers, a few drops of water dripped from the body of the god of tricks. If he had known, he shouldn't have made such a big noise. But it was too late to regret. The twisted tentacles swept over. The 3 gods and the shadow warriors who knew nothing were all enveloped. Boom. Boom. The sound of 2 heavy objects hitting the ground. The ancient trick god system has completely withdrawn from the stage of history. What does all this mean? When Gao Qiang heard the warning sound of the war game and finally got out of Data Delete S arms, everything was over. Gao Qiang only saw two bodies lying on the ground in front of him, as big as mountains. He turned his head and looked at Data Delete. Whoa! Data Delete acted cute. So, what happened just now? Lord. On the surface of the Wangchuan River, Sasha's call came at this moment. Just when Gao Qiang was about to be moved, Sasha's words continued to come. Lord, don't throw it away first, otherwise the chef's sister won't cook for you. It's not too late to throw it away after dinner. Moved in vain. Hey, Lord. After walking ashore, perhaps because the bodies of Janayu and Hans Han were too conspicuous, Sasha saw Gao Qiang under the bodies at a glance. It turns out that Lord didn't throw it away. Walking close to Gao Qiang and looking at the huge wild boar beside him, Sasha swallowed her saliva. How long can a mountain last? Sasha has never tried it. But it doesn't matter. If she can't finish it, she still has her son. If her son can't finish it, there are still grandsons. There will always be. Boom. Julugo hits Sasha on the forehead with his fist. He didn't say why, and walked straight towards the corpse. Taking out a knife, Julugo drilled into the mouth of one of the gods. After a long time, he broke a hole and drilled out from the side. While drilling out, Julugo was still amazed. All the internal organs have been processed. This is the first time I have seen ingredients processed so well.